All right, in this video, we're going to talk about a delicate conversation, which is divorce and real estate. And I've had the good fortune, or well, maybe not good fortune, but I've been involved in, well over 100 transactions in my career where I'm dealing with how people can dispose of their real estate in a divorce or separation situation. I've seen some pretty crazy situations over the years, and I'm going to share with you some of my insights. I've got some stories to share. Some of them might even be humorous, even though this is not a humorous time if you're going through this, but hopefully even some of the stories will bring a perspective for you. But at the end of this video, you're going to have a pretty good understanding of maybe some of the options that you can take. Keep in mind, I'm not a lawyer. This is not to give you any legal advice on any divorces. This is strictly real estate related only, and how to dispose of real estate. That's what this video is all about, and I think you're going to find it very helpful. And I want you to do me a favor. If you really enjoy this video, give me the thumbs up and like it. You can hit the subscribe button as well and receive more of these videos as I do them, because I actually do them every week. And of course, you can ring the bell and you can be notified as I do these videos too. So the first thing I notice is that when people are going through a separation, it's one of the first questions they tend to ask themselves is, well, what's our house worth, or what are we going to do here? We should get an idea of just the value of our property. And so I have gone in many times at the very, very beginning of a divorce. And I remember, I don't know how many times I've just sat at the kitchen table and they're just trying to find out what the house is worth, but they haven't really mapped out any plan of anything other than let's just find out what the house is worth. And to tell you the truth, I'm going into a situation like that and, neither party really knows what they're doing. And there's so many questions to be asked and answered at that point in time. And I can tell you, I've had some pretty difficult conversations, and there's been some tears, and there's been some anger, and there's been some resentment. So I've seen all of the above. So here's the first piece of advice that I'm going to give you when it comes to separation, divorce, and real estate is, look, you can't do anything to move forward, number one, unless you can somehow at least get on the same page when it comes to the house or the property that you both own, okay? I know that in a separation, there's no question you're obviously not on the same page on a lot of things, or you probably wouldn't be separating. But you gotta try to find some common ground on the house itself. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've had a phone call and the spouse that's not living in the house initiated the call to someone like me saying, you know what, I'm living in a friend's basement suite and my spouse is living in the house, and I'm trying to get my equity out of the house so I can figure out what my plans are going to be, because I'm having a struggle here. I got a mortgage payment I'm responsible for, and I'm renting a basement suite. I can't really do anything. So, I'd like you to, call my spouse and talk to them and see if we can't arrange for a meeting. And I'll call the spouse and they'll say, well, I'm not prepared to do anything at this point in time. And clearly they're not on the same page. And the person that's maybe living in the house feels like, well, there's a lot of other things that have to be worked out yet. And I'm not even going to have a real estate conversation until some of these other things get worked out. And that's fair. However, that's the kind of phone calls I get on a regular basis. And that's when I say you've got to be on the same page, meaning that both parties are at the point where they're ready to sell the property. It's not just the one person that wants to sell the property. And sadly, the person who is not living in the house oftentimes is the one that's most motivated to get the house sold. And the person that is living in the house is taking their time because they feel like, well, there's a lot of other things that we have to work out, and this is going to be maybe the last thing that we deal with. So that's why if you're watching this video and you are the person not living at the house, you want to really try to get some communications with your spouse to get to that point where you've both agreed to sell the property. Because obviously, for someone like me who's a real estate professional, I can't do anything to list and sell the house if you're both not going to agree and sign the contract. Now, the other thing I come across quite a bit then is, there could be a lot of anger, resentment, and even to the point of even choosing which real estate professional you want to work with, can be a challenging situation. I one time went to this house and I was referred, to come here to sit at the kitchen table with one of the spouses. And anyway, so I didn't know him. I did happen to know who she was because she worked with someone that had used me for their real estate services in the past. So I went over to the house, and this just gives you an idea of how the tension can be at the kitchen table in these situations. And there's a story in here that there's a lesson to be learned at the same time. So anyway, we're sitting down at the kitchen table and we're going through some of the recent solds in the neighborhood to establish what would be a realistic sale price in the current market conditions. And I remember, we had in this particular home, it was a newer neighborhood and there were homes that were very, very similar that had just recently sold. So it was pretty easy to establish, what a fair market value price would be. And I remember giving that number, and of course she said, well, that's exactly what I had thought the price should be. And the whole time I was sitting at this kitchen table, he was pretty quiet. He didn't say very much at all, but the moment that I shouted out the number and said, this is where I think we should probably be listing, he said, well, there's no way we're going to be listing it for that cheap of a price. I expected it to be a lot higher than that. This is ridiculous. You're just wasting our time. And anyway, he was very vocal, and you could tell he was just full of anger and resentment. And then to my surprise, she pipes up and she looks at me and she says, well, Rob, you can see why we're getting divorced. She says, he just wants to drag this thing on, and he wants to list it too high, and it's just gonna, sit on the market for 3 months. And she says, this is exactly why we're getting a divorce. This is the sort of thing that he does. And he pops up from the kitchen table and he goes upstairs. And I was thinking, what on earth is he doing? Then he comes downstairs and he's got the marriage license. He says, oh, so you want a divorce? He says, good, I'll give you a divorce right now. And he just ripped it in half and he threw it on the kitchen table. Well, you can understand, the word awkward, comes to mind right now. I'm sitting there wondering what the heck what do we do next? Well, obviously, this is a classic example of the two were not on the same page. He was pretty unhappy that this divorce was even happening. And it's true, he wanted to list the house too high. And I think he did want to drag this thing on, because I really feel like maybe he felt like this was the last thing that he had a piece of control over, because, this divorce was happening whether he would like it or not. So you can see some of the situations you can get into, and when there's anger and resentment involved, and if there's one person in the marriage that maybe isn't quite as committed, to making this sale happen, oftentimes they'll put a wrench in things. I had another situations once where we did get it listed, both parties did end up signing, and I brought them a full price offer. Now keep in mind, this was when the market was not a real hot seller's market. This was a more balanced market, so it was not very common at that moment in time to see full price offers, but I managed to get a full price offer, and then one of the spouses just wouldn't sign it. And that spouse was, again, apparently something had happened, and he was angry and resentment as well, and just was not prepared to sign it. And of course, we lost the buyer, and we had to start again from zero. And we did eventually get to the finish line, but we never got that same price again. And there's another example of just not being on the same page. So when it comes to real estate and divorce, you've got to find that common ground. And I can tell you from a real estate agent, I've had some tough conversations where I've had to talk to one of the spouses, and they'll, vent and rant and rage over, the whole situation that they're in. And then I've talked to the other spouse, and they vent and rant and rage. And, and I'm in the middle of this whole thing really just my goal is to try to help these two get to the finish line and simply sell the house. But I understand emotions are high when it comes to divorce. And this is why I've learned over the years, I just absolutely do not judge. Now, I've been through 2 divorces myself, so I do understand, the anxiety and the pain and, the resentment that can be carried through. I've been there, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm probably the least judgmental agent that you'll ever come across when it comes to this. I do know that it takes 2 people to get married, it takes 2 people to get divorced, and so I step in the gap there and try to find some common ground between the two, never taking sides of either one, but always listening and understanding and looking for that solution. And I found that that can really help settle things down. And I've been very instrumental in being able to give some really good advice as well, especially when there's children involved, just to remember, you really focus on what's best for the children as well. Don't just get completely wrapped up only in what you think is what's best for you. Think of the children too. Try to be as fair as you possibly can, and you never know what can come out of it. And even, I've had couples that have sold the house, broken up, and even, a year later got back together again. And I think they managed to do that because they set aside some differences, they moved forward with the separation, but then they realized that there was a chance and there was a hope for their relationship. So that's always, that's always there. And, if you don't want to take any crazy steps, it might ruin all chances and burn all bridges as well. Now, I once had a situation too where I had a client that, apparently, he moved out of the house, and he kept calling, and he was stopping by the house unannounced, and got to the point where, she wanted to get a restraining order. So she called me and she says, "Just so you know, I got a restraining order against my husband." And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. I don't know what really to do with that. But she said, "Hey, you just need to know you can have no contact, or he can have no contact with me with this restraining order." So she says, even anything he says to you, you can't even tell me. She says, it can't be directly or indirect information given to me from him. So I thought, okay, yeah, well, I guess that's what the cards I'm dealing with. So that's all fine and dandy. Well, would you believe what happens next is she calls me and she says, and I'll never forget it, was on a Friday night. And she says, "Rob, the police were here. And they've taken my husband away, and he's probably going to be spending the weekend in jail. He broke the restraining order." And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's a little bit crazy. And then would you believe, 3 hours later, we get an offer on their house. And, and I called her and I said, well, this offer is really only left open till Saturday at 4:00. And, is there any way we could, reach your husband in jail or something? I didn't know. It's such a crazy situation. I wasn't sure what to do. She says, well, I don't know. You'll have to try to, call the remand center or something. Well, I had no success, and I had to find a way of not necessarily, disclosing to the real estate agent representing the buyer what was going on, but try to put this off until next week. And, sure enough, he gets out on Monday morning, and I talked to him, and you can tell he wasn't in the best of moods. And as luck would have it, we did manage to put it together, and I was able to just be more of a calming voice for him. I know he was frustrated and angry on Monday, but we managed to get it to the finish line. And I'll never forget what even happened after that. It was about a month later, because it was about 2 months for possession day. She called me and wanted to know if they could get out of this deal that they signed. And I said, why? Why do you want to get out of it? I said, we sold the house. She says, oh, my husband and I are getting back together. So you could tell it's just about anything can happen. Fortunately, they did make the decision that they would continue and sell the house and maybe rent for a while and just see how things worked out before they managed to go and stay in this house with each other. But I think in these stories that I'm giving you, as crazy as they are, is I've learned over the years that anything can happen. Again, emotions are very high, and it's my job just to be that voice of reason and deal with the emotion, because even though we're dealing with a transactional thing like a house, we're dealing with contracts, and there's legalities, and we're dealing with what a home is worth or what it isn't worth, and there's a negotiation. And you might think that that's just all cut and dry. It is absolutely never cut and dry in this business. Emotions are always high in real estate, but they're exceptionally high when it comes to divorce. So I take this kind of knowledge and information that I've gained over the years, and I apply it to these situations. And I think if you were to reach out to me and you have questions about divorce and separation and some of the steps to take and how to handle it, definitely I would be able to give you some good advice about it, because I've been down this road so many times now. I'd have to say there's not much that I haven't seen. Now, if you are going through a separation or a divorce and you are in the early stages, perfectly okay. Do me a favor, just reach out to me, and we'll have a conversation and take a look at what the strategy will be. If this video has been helpful, do me a big favor. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, get notified as I do more. I do 2 of these videos every single week, and you can also give me the thumbs up if you actually like this video.